I've been waiting for this to happen. It's been a week since that bitch put it on me. And to think I loved her. On the way home, I was the happiest I'd been this whole week, although not particularly happy, just the highest point I'd been this whole time. Perhaps it had something to do with the 3 pints of Jaipur IPA I drank. I couldn't afford to get too drunk, although perhaps I should have, given what was to come. It was Friday evening, and it had just gotten dark. I stuck to the lighted streets, but there was one dark area under the trees that I couldn't avoid. Although I could have crossed the road, the lights were working there. But I wanted to end this once and for all, and so I had to let him face me. And then he appeared. He had a baseball bat in his hands. If I were him, I would choose a cricket bat. I recognized him because I had done my research. There were two of them. Looks like he brought his father with him, fair enough. It was clear that he was angry. I knew this feeling. "Bastard, I'll teach you," he said. "When I'm done with you, you won't be able to destroy anyone's family anymore." I raised my hands in submission. "Everything is not as it seems," I told him. It didn't stop him, and I didn't think it would. That wouldn't stop me either. He continued to swing the bat. I kept an eye on her. I saw her coming. Besides, him muttering "bastard" was a pretty good clue. He did not expect such a turn and stumbled, falling on his back. The second guy stepped forward, raising his fists, but the one lying on the ground said, "No, Dad, I'll figure it out myself." The big man stopped. It probably helped that two of my friends appeared out of the darkness to make sure I got home safely. I looked at the guy lying on the ground and shouted to him. "She lied. She said she was divorced. No damn thing, she's married to me. I know, I found out on Friday, and that's why I left her." "Did you leave her?" "She said that she left you." "No, believe it what you want, but I don't mess with married women. My ex-wife cheated on me, and I'm not going to do the same to anyone else." "I don't believe you," he said. And why should he believe me? I took out my mobile phone. "I can prove it, but you might not like it." I opened the photos and showed him part of the letter his wife wrote to me. Just the part where she said I didn't know she was married. My father was still standing nearby, and my friends were behind me, which may have also played a role. It was a small risk, but I reached out and said, "Let me take you and your father to the pub. I'll tell you why I don't sleep with married women on principle. And I have to buy these two a beer," I added, pointing to my friends behind me. He took my hand and I helped him up. When he stood up, I shook his hand and said, "Nice to meet you, Pete. It's a pity that under such circumstances." I let go of his hand and offered my hand to his father. "And you, Ron." He shook my hand. They looked a little stunned. Yes, I knew their names. I've been doing some pretty thorough research since Friday. As I reached out to Pete as he lay on the ground, I wondered how I had ended up in a situation where I was reaching out to the husband of the woman I'd been sleeping with for the past 5 months. On the way to the pub, I started replaying in my head how I had fallen in love with this man's wife. I was on a business trip to Portsmouth, visiting the shipyard there and staying at my usual hotel. That evening, to kill time, I was standing at the bar, waiting to be served, when a pretty brunette walked up next to me. She was neatly dressed and looked smart. Like a real cheeky person, I checked to see if there was a wedding ring on her finger, and there was neither a white stripe nor a dent from the ring. This, of course, did not mean that she was free. "Are the bartenders on strike?" she asked. She had a very pleasant voice, but with a hint of irritation, as if she urgently needed a drink. "There is only one bartender here, and he went to change the barrel. It's my fault. I couldn't finish the last glass. The beer turned out sour. I'm sorry." "Oh, don't worry. Today is a terrible day. Another minute or two won't change anything," she said. "I know how it happens," I answered. "Sometimes you hit your head against the wall, but in the end, it's just your head and you split." She looked at me and said, "I hope a large gin and tonic will relieve my headache." I looked at her carefully, trying not to stare or be rude. She was about my age, maybe a little younger. It was hard to say, somewhere between 30 and 40, very pretty, with wavy black hair just below her shoulders. Not fat, not thin, everything is in its place. She had a confidence about her that I liked. She started the conversation herself, and few women are capable of that. The bartender, John, is back. He looked at both of us, and I nodded in her direction, letting him know that he should serve her first. John and I got on well, perhaps because we were both in the Royal Navy and both served on the same ship, albeit at different times under the same captain. He approached her. She told John that I was first, but I nodded again for him to serve her first. "You need it more than I do," I said. She ordered a gin and tonic, a large one, then turned to me and said to John, "And whatever this gentleman orders." He didn't ask, he immediately poured me a pint of hobgoblin. I was here yesterday and a few other evenings over the last year or so. I looked over my shoulder, then back at her and said, "I don't see a single gentleman here." She tilted her head slightly to the side, smiled, and said, "Oh, I think you are a gentleman, but only when you need it, and when it's not necessary, not at all." "You saw through me very quickly," I replied. She continued to smile. "Please don't misunderstand me," she said. "Would you mind if we dine at the same table? I can't buy you dinner with my company, but at least we can keep each other company after our terrible day." I didn't have much to do, so I agreed. Exchanging conversations with someone and, to be honest, spending quality time with a beautiful woman is always a bonus. We found a table. We talked about what we were doing in Portsmouth. She even named the city by its naval nickname, Pumps. She was on some kind of banking training program, and I, as I said, visited a shipyard. Her name was Jackie. We got to the point of discussing where each of us was from, and it turned out that we both live in the metropolitan area of Medway cities. I live in a small town in the east called Raynham and work at the Docks Museum in Chatham. She said that she lives on the other side of the agglomeration in Stride and works in Rochester for a bank where he trains employees. What a small world it is. It turns out that we are almost neighbors. We talked about families. I was divorced and had 2 children, Beth and Gary. She didn't ask about my ex-wife. I talked about my parents and my younger sister, who also lives next to her husband and 2 children. The whole family, including my ex-wife's parents, helped me with the children when I went on business trips. She said she had been married for 8 years, had 2 children, and lived in London. One day, she found her husband with his mistress, divorced him, and moved to Kent along with her work to get away from him. But he followed her to Kent and now lives just around the corner from her house. Her sister also lives nearby and works from home to look after the children when Jackie leaves. The ex-husband is constantly trying to win her back, destroying all her new relationships, and he has already succeeded several times. He has unlimited rights to communicate with children, and he often takes them away, thus trying to make peace with her. But she couldn't trust him, so she wasn't going to go back to him. She casually mentioned that she wasn't dating anyone right now. Then she looked at me and asked, "And you? Are you dating anyone?" "No, not really. There were a couple of dates, but nothing serious," I answered, looking at her and thinking. Beautiful, smart, confident woman. I'm sure she won't be left alone for long. Then I remembered that I should look at myself in the mirror. I wasn't handsome, but I wasn't ugly either. I haven't been hit by a bus lately. I ran whenever I could, and caring for 2 children kept me in shape. I thought about it. A man is a man. But I didn't do anything. It would be nice to spend the night in company. We chatted all evening, and as it was getting late, I said it was time for me to go to bed as I had to get up early in the morning to meet my contacts at the shipyard before the morning rush started at 7:30. I have already arranged for an early breakfast. She looked at me, smiled, and said, "Could you walk me to the door?" Who would refuse? Unfortunately, her room was on the other side of the hotel than mine, but this was not a problem, and I agreed. I walked her to the door, but she didn't invite me inside, as I expected, although I admit I hoped. But she suggested meeting for dinner the next evening. We got along well, and I agreed. We agreed to meet at 7:30 at the bar. As I walked back through the bar to my side of the hotel, John the bartender waved as I walked past with a pint of hobgoblin in front of him. He and I chatted often before when I stayed here. He was a nice guy. Anyway, he was an ex-sailor, so I approached him. I told him to get himself a drink at my expense. The museum paid for my hotel and food, but I had to buy my own drinks. After pouring himself a beer, John, being the wise bartender he is, said to me, "Sir, the lady you were talking to is a frequent guest at this hotel. I think she's an accountant or something at one of the local banks. Let me be somewhat direct, sir. If you continue to date this lady, may I suggest you use the machine in the men's room?" I thought about his words. Does she often, let's say, receive guests? Not always, sir. Every 2 or 3 visits. She seems quite picky and very reserved. Do you often give such advice to men? He smiled. Only those who spend time on me and buy me beers, sir. You are the first for now. I laughed. I finished my beer, thanked him, and went to my room. I knew bartenders have many responsibilities, but I didn't think one of them was advising people to wear protection. I smiled, thinking that maybe tomorrow I will be lucky. After all, this hasn't happened for a long time, but in any case, I will be grateful to John, even if I'm unlucky. The next day at the shipyard went better than I expected. Arriving early in the morning helped. I managed to collect several artifacts for the museum and even arranged transportation, so the day turned out well. John's advice that nothing was guaranteed with this lady made me take my time. I didn't want to put pressure on her. I preferred to let everything happen naturally. We met in the evening, as agreed, at 7:30. I didn't try too hard to look better than usual, but I was neat. However, she clearly tried. When she approached the table, I stood up and pulled out the chair for her, as if it were a real date. A real date. I faltered a bit and told her I looked normal, but there she was, absolutely stunning in her red silk blouse and black leather skirt, complete with 4-inch heels, classic beauty. I immediately apologized because it sounded too direct. "See, I told you that you are a gentleman. I feel like I should run upstairs and put on a jacket and tie. You shamed me with your appearance." "Oh, there's no point in putting on something that you'll have to take off later," she answered with a smile. "I might even help you with this." We finished dinner with a bottle of wine. It was around 9:45 when a serious expression appeared on her face. "Jeffrey." It was strange to hear her call me so formally. I introduced myself to her as Jeff, which is what I expected her to call me. But let's see where this leads. "Jeffrey, we are both single, and I would like you to come to my room to spend time with me. But I must say right away that you are not the first person I have done this to." There must have been a look of surprise on my face because she reached across the table and took my hand. There was no one on this trip this time, but sometimes I really need company. Not always. I try to be picky, but I'm sure the hotel staff noticed everything a long time ago. "I'm pretty sure you're clean, and so am I, but I can't risk it. You will have to use protection." To be honest, despite John's warning, her frankness took me by surprise. It sounded too direct. But what could I say? Spend the night with a beautiful woman and perhaps wake up next to her in the morning. I missed this. I won't insist on staying the night, but it would be nice. I headed to the bar and asked John for a bottle of Merlot. He raised an eyebrow in surprise, and I just smiled stupidly. While he was getting it out, I looked back at Jackie. It dawned on me. She was not dressed particularly modestly in a bright red silk blouse. As we left the bar, she slid her hand into mine, and it felt damn comfortable. In her room, I poured 2 glasses of wine. I could tell she was eager to get started as she slowly and seductively began undoing the buttons on her blouse. I wanted to enjoy the moment. I handed her a glass of wine and said, "Do you mind if I do this for you?" "That would be very nice. Yes, please." I took a sip of wine, put the glass on the table, and we made love. It was amazing. She stroked my cheek with a smile and then kissed me like a loved one. Unfortunately, I had my own things to do. I went to the bathroom. When I returned, she had already poured 2 glasses of wine and handed me one. I took the glass and took a sip, then reached for my clothes. "Please stay the night," she asked. "I'm not sure," I said, showing token resistance to give her the opportunity to change her mind. "Please, I miss hugs so much." "I need this so much," she admitted. And I missed it too. Lying in bed next to a warm body, someone who cares about you, is something I really missed. Even though I could only pretend that she really cared about me, I agreed and went back to bed. We sat down, leaning against the headboard. She laid her head on my shoulder. We just sat there in silence, drinking wine. It was very cozy. After finishing the wine, we lay down under the blanket, hugging each other again. It was one of the best nights of sleep I've had in years. Admittedly, the morning might have been a little awkward. I noticed her underwear. It didn't look anything special. It didn't feel like she was going to seduce anyone. Maybe she really doesn't do this often. I woke up at my usual time at 6:30. He began to carefully get out of her embrace, but this woke her up. "Thank you," she said, slightly embarrassed. "I don't usually do that." For some reason, I believed her. "See you at breakfast?" I asked. She gave me a beaming smile. "Yes, if you invite me, that would be wonderful." "Then I'll see you at 8, I smiled and left. It turned out that she arrived only at 10 minutes past 7, but still sat down at the table opposite me. I thought she might ignore me, but she apologized for being late, saying she needed to call home to check on the kids. We had a great time over breakfast, just chatting about small things like traffic on the M25 and the weather at the weekend. It was very nice. She asked when I would come to Portsmouth again. I said I don't know, it all depends on when new artifacts for the museum will appear. "I hope I see you again," she said. "I would like that." I smiled and replied, "Me too." But there was little time left, and I had to go. We hugged, and it was a little strange after such a night. I hurried upstairs to collect my things. Since I only left her room in the morning, I had little time to get ready. When I went to the front desk to pay my bar tab, John, the same bartender, was there again. He seemed to be omnipresent. "How did you enjoy your stay, sir?" he asked with his usual smile. "Great, thank you, John, and thank you very much for the advice," I replied, smiling. "Always happy to help, sir," he said and paused. "By the way, sir, that was something new. This lady usually doesn't have breakfast with her friends. Usually, they just ignore each other. You are also the first person to order a bottle of wine for her, sir." John grinned. "And unfortunately, we won't be able to refund you for a bed you didn't use." This is also the first time. I didn't know how to respond, so I just laughed, shook his hand, and we exchanged knowing smiles. I made it to the shipyard in time to see the truck carrying my artifacts set off. I had to arrive at Chatham long before him to take delivery. I wish I could say that I didn't think about Jackie for the next 2 weeks, but that wouldn't be true. Every time I drove around the city, I looked for every woman with long, wavy black hair, but I never saw her. I don't know what I would do if I met her. Then something strange happened at work. My work phone rang, although we almost always used mobile phones at the museum. Meave from the reception was on the line. "Jeff, there's a girl on the line. She wants to talk to you. It's strange that she doesn't know your phone number. She says her name is Jackie and mentioned that you might have met in Portsmouth." I immediately remembered that night. It was impossible to forget her. "Okay, Meave, connect. Thank you." It was quiet for a few seconds. Then I heard a quiet, slightly hesitant voice. "Hello, Jeff?" "Hi, Jackie," I replied. "What a pleasant surprise. How can I help? I have an old submarine for sale here for only £500,000. I was nervous and didn't know why I said that. "Sorry," she laughed quietly. "I'm afraid it won't fit in my pond. Although, we don't even have a pond. But I'm sure my son would like it. He loves submarines." She sounded as nervous as I felt. But in the end, she was the one who called me. "We'll have to take him on a tour sometime. I'll even give you a personal tour." I hoped that this invitation would find a response. "I don't think this is a good idea. He will tell my ex everything, and then the problems will start." Crap. I think I upset her. I needed to change the subject. "How did you find me?" I asked, trying to return the conversation to a positive direction. "I called the hotel. I didn't know your last name, but John the bartender told me it, although he didn't give me any more details. Then I called the museum. but they also wouldn't give me your personal information. They only gave me an email address, and then I asked the girl from the reception to connect me with you. Here I am." She hesitated a little. "Listen, do you want to meet? Let's have coffee on Saturday. My ex will be with the kids, so I'm free. I heard that there is a cozy cafe in your city. Can you find a nanny?" I thought about it. Today was Wednesday. I will definitely have time to find a nanny. I'll definitely try. I think I can organize something. Give me your number, and I'll call you back as soon as I know everything. Sorry, Jeff, I can't give out my number. It's too dangerous. I think my ex somehow cloned my phone. I'll call you from this number tomorrow. Is that okay? And then I realized I don't know the names of her children, although I myself told her about my own Beth and Gary. We were so absorbed in each other those few days that we hardly talked about the children, only about our exes. Although I never mentioned where my ex-wife is, I just have full custody of the kids. My former relative Sandra's parents always helped with the children. Only one call was needed. And sure enough, the next day I received a call from Jackie, and we agreed to meet in a small cafe, not far from the main street. After that, I walked as if on clouds for the whole week. Even my mother noticed that something was happening to me. I arrived at the cafe 5 minutes early, but she was already waiting for me. As soon as I walked in, she waved to someone behind the counter. I was about to order tea, but her smile immediately lured me to the table. I sat down opposite her. She didn't beat around the bush. "Your tea will be brought now. I know that you like it when it's hot. And by the way, I want to continue to see you." "What?" I was stunned. "I said that your tea will be here soon." "No, not that. Do you really want to keep dating?" "Yes, Jeffrey, I miss you. I know it was just one night and a lot of talking, but I missed you." I was so shocked that I was speechless for a moment. "I missed you too," I finally managed to answer. "Perhaps we could spend next Saturday afternoon together. My ex is going golfing for the weekend, so my sister can look after Katie and Ben. We could go to the coast." "That would be great," I said. "I'll see if I can organize something. Really, this is a little awkward, but can I call you to clarify?" "Sorry, but I can't risk it. At our work, personal calls are monitored. I'd better call you myself within a week." Then I had an idea. "I have my ex-wife's old phone number. I can give it to you if you can charge it." She thought for a moment and then smiled. Apparently, she did not find any objections. "Okay," she said, "and will you really show me where you live?" "Yes, sure. The children are with their grandparents, so there is no one at home. We still maintain good relations. You once mentioned that there was something more between you and your ex than you told. Maybe one day you'll tell me." "Yes, I'll tell you. But not today. Today we'll just take a walk and I'll give you the phone." She smiled. It was not far from my house on Thames Avenue, but what pleased me most was that as we walked along the street, she carefully hooked my little finger with hers. It seemed to be a gesture that symbolizes something more than just a fleeting connection. I was glad that before going out to the cafe, I quickly cleaned up the house. I was not expecting a guest, but when I was getting ready for the meeting, I decided to put everything in order just in case. It's amazing how kids can leave so much mess behind in a matter of minutes. I gladly let her into my house, although I didn't expect it to end in bed. It would, of course, be nice, but I didn't expect it. We went into the living room, I made us coffee, and gave us a short tour of the house. I took out my old phone and told her the password. She entered my number and showed me how it now looks in her contacts, Jeff Work. I was surprised that she wrote my name with just an F and raised an eyebrow. "Just in case," she explained with a slight smile. I didn't want her to leave, but it was inevitable. She said she had to go. I offered to walk her to the car, but she replied that she wanted to walk alone. I took her to the door, opened it, and when she was about to go out, she suddenly pushed her back, put her arms around my neck, and kissed me. She whispered to me, "Thank you so much for showing me part of your life." And so she left. And I was left standing in the corridor, wondering where all this was leading. When my ex-wife's parents brought Beth and Gary back, They seemed to notice that I was confused about something. They gave me a warm hug and a firm handshake, which was nice. I put the kids to bed, sat down at the computer, and started catching up on my favorite YouTube channels about ships and boats. And suddenly an SMS arrived on the phone I gave to Jackie. Thank you very much. That night, I slept like a baby. Both sets of grandparents immediately noticed that something good was happening in my life. They didn't push, but I no longer had any problems with babysitting Beth and Gary. Jackie came to pick me up on Saturday. We drove to Herne Bay, walked along the beach, and then had fish and chips on the beach. When we returned to my house, she came in for a cup of coffee. I wondered if there might be something more today, but I didn't want to force things. I received the answer to this question almost immediately as soon as we entered the house. When are Beth and Gary coming back? She asked. They will stay with their grandparents for the night, and tomorrow morning they will go to the zoo, I answered. Damn, I wish I knew that ahead of time, she said, rolling her eyes. I could stay the night. But I need to be home by 7, so we have 3 hours. Where is your bedroom? We made full use of those 3 hours. That's how we started seeing each other regularly. I was receiving calls from my ex-wife's phone. Jackie either came to see me or we met somewhere in the city. She still wasn't ready to meet my kids, even though we had been dating for several months. I didn't insist, but I still wondered where all this was going. Despite the uncertainty, I was happy to spend time with her when she was around. Waking up next to her was something I had been waiting for a long time. Lying with her, holding her in my arms, just hugging her, and not wanting to sleep, it was incredible. To stay awake, we played I Spy in the dark, using our memories and imagination. After a couple of months, things started to happen that worried me a little. One evening, Jackie admitted that she had to go to Portsmouth again in a couple of weeks, and she knew that I would be worried. Then I realized it was time to tell her the truth. We went to Whitstable on the coast, and there, sitting on the beach, I told her the whole story of my divorce and that my ex-wife was in prison. But she's due out next month, and I'll have to let her see the kids. I also shared why I can't stand cheating. After that, Jackie was silent for a long time. She seemed lost in thought, and our return home passed in silence. But when we arrived, her mood improved a little. After we made love, lying on my shoulder, she looked at me and said, "Don't worry, dear. I will never betray you. Everything that happened before was just for the sake of company. And yes, I have needs. But you are all I need. You meet all my needs. Please don't worry. And your friend John will probably tell you if something goes wrong." We didn't make promises to each other. I had no power over her. She was a free woman, and I understood that. But I noticed that this was the first time she called me darling. Another thing that bothered me was that she never said where she lived, probably so that I wouldn't come to her without warning. Although I would not do this, I did not want to create problems for her with her ex-husband. One Saturday, I drove to Rochester to buy a model ship for Gary. It suddenly occurred to me that I still hadn't turned off the tracking feature on the phone I'd given Jackie. I checked, and he was in her office. But she didn't work on Saturdays. I sent her a message asking if everything was okay, then called her. She did not answer the message, and the call was forwarded to voicemail. And then I realized, she always calls me only during working hours. On Monday morning, she called me, but she was not in the best mood. I lied to her, saying that I accidentally dialed her number, thinking I was calling my ex-wife, who was already out of prison. I then told her that I didn't know where our romance was going, and that if she was going to get mad about random calls, I might need to reconsider our relationship. 4 months together, and she still hasn't met my children. It's like she's just using me. With these words, I hung up. A few minutes later, I received a message in which she apologized and promised to call in the evening. This was something new. And indeed, she called. There was sadness in the voice. She apologized for her harshness, explaining that she was having problems with her ex-husband again. Then she asked if she could come see me on Wednesday around 8:30. I replied that it was suitable and offered to introduce her to the children, but added that I could find a nanny if she was not ready yet. She said that she was still sorting out her thoughts and was not yet ready to meet children. Jackie arrived on Wednesday and I cooked dinner. She apologized again and we discussed our issues. After dinner, I told her, "You are a strong, confident woman, but that doesn't always make you right. We are partners in this relationship, and I don't mind you taking the lead sometimes. But if I say I want to do something, I expect you to accept it, or at least discuss it with me. If you can't do that, we'll have to think about how to move forward." I remembered one incident that happened a couple of weeks ago. It was a bank holiday, and we both took the day off to go to the museums at the old RAF airfield at Manson. I wanted Gary, who since childhood decided to follow in my footsteps and join the Navy, learn something about other technology besides ships. I had already taken him to maritime museums more than once, and I wanted to show him something new, for example, aviation. However, we first had to stop at the museum in Chatham to pick up some documents, and we began to argue. Jackie didn't want to go to the museum with me because she took a day off from work and was afraid that someone would notice her. We had a little fight, but I offered her a compromise. She could stay at my house while I went to get the documents or go with me, but stay in the car, where no one would see her. The car windows were tinted, and if you sit on back seat, then the risk of being noticed was minimal. In the end, she agreed to stay in the car while I ran to work. For some reason, this incident remained in my memory, and I wanted to clarify our relationship with her so that similar situations would not arise in the future. We talked a lot after that, but didn't make a final decision. Jackie agreed that she was sometimes too pushy and promised to listen to me more. However, despite our differences, the night ended in bed. I knew she had to leave at a certain time, but I didn't want to waste precious minutes sleeping. I decided to do everything to spend as much time as possible with her in the warmth of her arms. We played our favorite game of I Spy again in the dark, trying to stay awake longer. But one question haunted me. I responded with sleepiness. Lamp. Her. Light switch. That LS is stupid, so no. I tried my best to stay awake. Sorry, I'm broken. I give up. Lovers. I smiled to myself as I fell asleep. I guess since we just had sex, we could be called lovers. She had to leave early in the morning. I felt her get out of bed, but I didn't wake up completely. I kind of heard her getting dressed. I felt more as she approached me. She stroked my face, kissed my cheek, and then whispered, "I love you." She turned and left. I managed to pull myself out of sleep when she came to the door. "Jackie, did you just say what I thought you said?" "Yes," she said very quietly. Then she left. Damn it, did she just make a commitment? This shouldn't have happened. I thought about this while lying in bed. I also had deep feelings for her. Then my world collapsed again. A couple of weeks later, I took Friday off, and we had just returned from another trip to the coast. It was raining. This time we were in her car. It threw her down. One of those big summer storms that happens on this little island. She had a raincoat in the car, which she threw over her head and shoulders and followed me as we ran to the front door, laughing. As we ran, her purse fell from her hands and burst open, spilling its contents onto the floor. Like most of us, she doesn't carry much money with her anymore, but her engagement ring flew out of her purse. I stopped dead in my tracks. I bent down and picked it up. I could understand that she was keeping it. She had been married to her ex for 8 years, and I was struck by the look on her face. She turned pale and began to cry. It was more than just keeping her rings as keepsakes. I could clear this up in one go, so I asked the question, "You're still married, aren't you?" She collapsed on the floor, her hands covering her face. She was now crying heavily. What I was hoping for was that she would say no, but she just nodded her head. I didn't know what to do. Scream, or walk away, but I felt tears streaming down my face. "I think you better leave and not come back," I said. I was able to get ready before the kids got home from school. I spent the whole weekend focusing on Harry and Beth and spoiling them as much as I could. They were not sent to bed until they were almost asleep on the spot. I didn't want to be alone. I even almost called Sandra, but realized that it would be the wrong signal. I looked longingly at the bottle of gin, but decided to stick to beer and not overindulge. I tried to keep myself busy with work and children all week so as not to think. Colleagues stayed away from me. It was obvious that something was wrong. I was dreading the weekend because Harry and Beth had to go see their mother. This meant that I would be left alone. I looked around the house. It was full of things to do: garden, painting, dirty car. I even thought about throwing all the alcohol down the sink so I wouldn't be tempted. But I am stronger than this and did not do this. Sandra, when picking up the children, expressed concern and offered to join them, but I refused. An hour later, my parents appeared. They were also worried about my condition. Looks like Sandra called them. I reassured them that everything would be okay, but I didn't go into detail about what was making me so upset. Some of the gin did disappear from the bottle by the time I went to bed and cried. Sandra took the children every other weekend and most holidays. After she left prison, we met with a psychologist and social workers. It was decided that if 2 supervised visits went well, she would be given unrestricted access to the children. This would benefit everyone. Sandra would return to a normal life. I would have a break from the children, and the children would restore their relationship with their mother. Late Saturday morning, there was a knock on my door. I opened it and saw a woman who looked like Jackie, but with blonde hair. "Hi, my name is Janice. I'm Jackie's sister. Can I come in?" She sounded very nervous. I was ready to close the door on her, but that would have been rude. I try not to be rude to people. "I came to return this phone and give you a letter," she said, holding out the phone and letter. I opened the door completely. "Better come in," I said, pointing to the kitchen. I put the phone and letter on the table and went to put the kettle on. The rules of politeness are always observed in this house. "Sorry to bother you. Are Harry and Beth home?" "No, they're at my mother's for the weekend," I answered, getting busy making tea. I just made tea in a mug. I didn't put the kettle on. I didn't want her to linger. She knew the names of my children, and I began to wonder where this was all going. But before I could say anything, she continued. "Jackie and I talk often. And no, before you ask, I didn't know she was seeing anyone until it all went down. She hid it even from me." I served her tea. She took a sip and winced. I didn't ask if she added sugar. "Hot tea without sugar, just the way I like it," she said. "Jeffrey, I'm so sorry for all the pain Jackie caused you," she began again. "She told me about your divorce and how she felt like she had let you and her family down. The letter contains an apology and explanation. I was asked to wait for an answer. If you want, I can come back later after you've read it." I took the letter and handed it back to her. "There will be no answer," she cried. "You don't know me, and I have no right to ask for anything. But I read this letter, and I ask you, as a favor, to read it. I'm afraid it's a little confusing, but she's sincere." I could see that Janice was hurt by her sister's betrayal. "Please read it," she said, and taking the letter, she wrote something on the back of it, and then put the pen in her bag. I didn't even notice she had a bag. "We need to get together." I wrote my phone number on the back. "If you are truly the person Jackie describes you to be, you will read it. I think this will help you. Please call me. I'm here if anything happens." The last phrase seemed strange for a person who doesn't know me at all. She stood up. "Thank you for the tea. It was just the way I like it." I walked her to the door and said goodbye. After I closed the door, I stood there looking at her. Crap. I didn't notice her bag until she put the handle in it. It was an ordinary woman's bag, huge, containing everything, right down to the kitchen sink. Then I realized, other than her Jackie-like face and blonde hair, I don't even remember what she was wearing or what she looked like. I didn't even know how she got here. I really need to get my act together. I was fine when the kids were around, but as soon as I was alone, I started to fall apart. I looked at the garden. I had just cut the grass, but I missed chunks, and there were clumps of clippings lying around that I didn't bother to clean up. I looked at the windows I was painting. The paint ran, and there was a lot of paint on the glass, too. I didn't even use masking tape. I went to the window and looked at the car I washed yesterday. Obviously, I missed a few spots, and one of the wheels was still dirty. The lawn in front of the house was also in terrible condition. I gathered my strength and looked in the mirror. Not bad, at least I combed my hair and shaved yesterday. The clothes were clean, although wrinkled, but it was the weekend. It couldn't go on like this. I realized that I would be alone every other weekend when the kids were with their mother, and I would have long chunks of summer vacation ahead of me. Although work could help cope with this. I realized that I was doing household chores, but not paying attention to them at all. That's it, I decided. I'll have to apply for additional duty as a guide during the holidays. I'll have to discuss this with Sandra when she gets the kids back. The next step was to wash the car again thoroughly this time. I opened the doors and cleaned all the corners. Then I mowed the grass again, but this time properly. Painting was more difficult, but I started by stripping off the old paint and cleaning the windows. I washed them at the same time, although my careless painting will remind me of myself for a long time. The house was not cluttered, but I still decided to go through all the rooms and put things in order. I even went for a short run. For dinner, I ordered Chinese food. I took a shower and changed into home clothes while I waited for my order. Started to feel better. When the food arrived, I unpacked it and placed it on the kitchen table. The phone and the letter were lying there, and every time I passed by, I felt like they were ghostly pursuing me. Should you read the letter before or after dinner? I decided later. It's better to just enjoy the food someone prepared for me. I opened a couple of bottles of Tsingtao beer, and it went well with the beef and black bean gravy and fried rice. When dinner was finished, I washed, dried, and put away the dishes. I didn't use the dishwasher when I was alone. I took the phone and unlocked it. There were only those messages that I sent to her. Then I took the letter and took out a bottle of Warsteiner beer from the refrigerator. Today was the day when I wanted lager. I sat down on the sofa and opened the letter. It was handwritten, and I began to read. My dear Jeffrey, I call you darling because you are truly dear to me. I am incredibly sorry for the pain and suffering I have caused you. If there was a way to prevent this or make it easier, I would do it. But after you told me the reason for your divorce, it became obvious that you would suffer, but by then it was too late. We've already made love, and I made you break one of your rules because I lied. And by that time, I already realized that I was starting to fall in love with you. Before you ask, yes, I love my husband. My reasons for sleeping with men other than my husband are pathetic, superficial, and weak. But I will tell them anyway, and please believe me, although you have no reason to believe that after I met you, there was no one else. Pete is off and away for work, and when he returns, he is too tired to pay attention to me. I'm not complaining about him focusing on the kids, but I wish he had time for me too. I know he worked hard for our future, and everything would have been fine if he had gotten the promotion he was looking for. Sometimes it seemed to me that he was cheating while he was traveling. He had the opportunity, just like me. Maybe this explains his constant fatigue and reluctance to make love. I have no proof of his cheating, but it makes me nervous. My connections with men relieved tension. It was just sex, sometimes even good sex. Most of the men tried, and I was pleased. And then you showed up. You were different. You took care of me, and besides Pete, only you could completely satisfy me. With you, it was not just physical intimacy, it was love. But it wasn't just about sex. I felt like we were connected. You were a man I could respect. You would never put your career before your family. And yes, I was angry with Pete. There was a desire for revenge. He would go away for a week for work, and then go away for the weekend to play golf with his boss. I knew this was part of his promotion plan, but that meant I was alone with the kids and worked all week and didn't have much time off on the weekends. If it weren't for my sister, I don't know how I would have coped. This is wrong, but for some time the only joy for me was work. A clear structure and certainty of work was my only salvation, and this is also wrong. I know I should have talked to Pete about our problems, and I tried, but he didn't listen, and in the end, I just gave up. He kept saying that in a few months everything would change. I should have insisted, but I didn't. I felt depressed and lonely, but that's no excuse. I was wrong to cheat on him. And then you showed up, and trips to the sea made everything more bearable. I didn't know how to stop this without causing you more pain, so I chose the cowardly route and just did nothing, hoping that everything would somehow resolve itself. It resolved, but not the way I wanted, and I hurt the man I love. In fact, I hurt two men I love. I destroyed them both. I hope this isn't forever. If Pete can forgive me, I will never cheat on him again. If he files for divorce, and he has every right to do so, I will never contact you again. I know that you will never take me back. Pete began to suspect that I was having an affair at work. He had friends who followed me, but they thought it was about work. But he knew that the trips to Portsmouth offered me an opportunity, and this, coupled with my mood swings and desire for sex after returning home, made him wary. But his friend could not follow me to Portsmouth. The sex I gave him when he could was a guilty pleasure, but I blamed him for leaving so often. Pete knows about us, but he doesn't know who you are. He's not usually an aggressive person, but this can break him. I told him that you didn't know I was married. I don't think he believes me. Why should I believe him after what I did? Just like you, why should you trust me? I didn't tell him who you are, and I won't tell him. I use the excuse that I don't want him to go to jail if he does something rash, and that's true. I wasn't going to tell him anything, but when I returned home from you, I was in a terrible state. He wanted to calm me down, but I pushed him away. Then he asked me if I was upset because my boyfriend left me. I think he was joking, but I said no, I left him. It came out before I had time to think it through. And then his suspicions were confirmed. We had a fight, and I told him everything. Not everything, but enough to destroy our marriage and family. Pete and I have talked, and there may be a way out without divorce. I will do everything in my power to fix this. Jeffrey, my dear man, please believe me when I say I love you, it's true. And I cannot express in words how sorry I am for the pain I caused you. Please remember the good. Remember the beaches, walks, and our games of I Spy. This will remain only between us. None of this is your fault. I'm the only one to blame. J. I finished reading the letter and read it twice more. I went to the kitchen for another bottle of wobbly beer and sat on the couch, thinking about everything I had just read. Was I a fool? Was I dragged into this story because of my pretty face and sex? I didn't know if I really fell in love with her, or if it was just a desire that clouded my judgment. Looking back, all the signs were obvious. She easily organized our meetings. She knew Pete's schedule, his commute for work, his golfing habits, and was free to schedule times when we could meet. Her sister looked after the children while she was with me. But he was not without guilt either. Why couldn't they just talk to each other about their problems? My own marriage ended for completely different reasons. Sandra led a double life, putting on a show for me. When I destroyed this inner barrier of hers and united her two lives, she could not stand it and hit me. In her mind, this was not cheating, it was just a role she was playing. I still can't fully understand her logic, but that doesn't matter. Jackie told me not to come to her place or contact her in any way other than by phone. If her husband found out she had a boyfriend, he would give them hell. No, he wouldn't use violence, but he could start putting up obstacles. Temporarily cutting off financial support, ringing their doorbell early in the morning just to wake everyone up. Children's antics, but they greatly affected the lives of Jackie and her family, so she kept me a secret. She did not allow me to meet her children or sister, fearing that the children might let something slip, although her sister was aware. She said that when her ex calms down, we can all meet together. And I accepted it all. What an idiot I was. I realized that our trips were always east of my home. She never wanted to go west where her husband's colleagues, family, or friends might see her. Most of our meetings took place on weekdays rather than on weekends. How did I not notice this before? That's why she didn't want to go to the dock or museums with me. The beaches and coastlines were much safer for her. Now, looking back, even her words on the first night, "No trace," should have given me a hint. I thought about it. If I met her again, what would I do? Because of her selfish needs, she destroyed her family and hurt the two men she claimed to love. 2 days later, I received a message from an unknown number. It said, "He knows who you are. Be careful." That's how I fell in love and lost trust with the wife of the man who was now sitting opposite me in the pub. And so I found myself in a situation where I was buying beer for my ex-lover and his father. I ordered a beer for my friends Bob and Jack, and a glass for Pete and his father Ron, as well as for myself. We settled down in a quiet corner. I repeated again. I don't date married women. My ex-wife cheated on me. The pub was due to close in a few hours, and I didn't want to drag out the conversation, so I briefly explained why I don't contact married people. The full story would be more interesting, but it's too painful to remember. I took a long sip of beer and began my story. Even in the shortened version, it was long, too complex. I didn't want to go through it again, but I needed to convince Pete that I wasn't the one who was breaking up families. Sandra and I were married for 7 years. We have 2 children. She was a teacher at a local school, and I was a project manager for an engineering company. There was a new English teacher at school. He was gay and married to a man, so everyone thought that everything was safe with him. He created a drama club for children and wrote a play that they were going to stage. He and my wife played the main roles. Sandra had 2 friends at school. Their husbands were my friends. We played golf. Our families often met. Over time, problems began to appear in our marriage. Sandra started coming home late after rehearsals, claiming that she and her colleagues had gone to the pub and forgot to tell me. She was often too tired and the next week it was the opposite. She seemed distant. Even children began to notice this. All the signs pointed to her being unfaithful. I asked our mutual friends, but their answers were strange. Her friends' wives were too categorical in their denials. One day I came to a rehearsal unexpectedly. One of the wives immediately rushed into the hall, and the other began to distract me with loud conversation, which was not at all typical for her. Sandra ran out all excited, saying that they were rehearsing a surprise scene. It looked suspicious. I tried several times to come to the rehearsal unexpectedly, but they were always ready for my arrival. I think they were tracking my phone. One time I managed to go to the pub where they were supposedly sitting after rehearsals and watched them until they noticed me. It was obvious that there was something between Sandra and that teacher, but looks alone are not enough to cause divorce. However, when they saw me and abruptly pulled away from each other, I realized that my suspicions were correct. Before the play was staged, there was supposed to be a final rehearsal. When she left, I asked her directly if she was cheating on me. I expected her to lie, so I turned on the recorder. She denied and then hit me and left. 45 minutes later, I burst into the hotel room and found her naked in bed with this gay man. I recorded everything on camera. I filed for divorce. Everything got even worse. Because I had a video of her hitting me, she went to jail and lost her job. Given her criminal record, she will never be able to teach again. That teacher's husband also divorced him. My wife begged me to forgive her for the sake of the children. She said that it was only sex and that she only loves me. But I didn't believe her. Her friends covered for her so that I wouldn't find out about the betrayal. When their husbands found this out, it cast doubt in their marriages as well. One of the marriages could not stand it. The other is holding on only for the sake of the children. But I am afraid that as soon as the children grow up, it will also fall apart. That's how one woman destroyed 4 families with her novel. Now I have 2 children and full responsibility for them. We are innocent victims, but we continue to pay for her mistakes. And to top it all off, they began to bully me at work. There was a confrontation, and I had to change jobs. Here's my story. If you don't believe me, you can ask my friends. They are the husbands of the women who covered for her. I think that was the longest speech I've ever given on this topic. I felt empty. I looked at my glass. It was empty. I don't remember drinking it. Ron stood up to get more beer. Pete sat there, stunned. I continued. I don't blame you for coming to me. I would do the same if I were you. Pete nodded and muttered. Understood. Ron came back with beer and even brought a glass for my friends. Good man. Pete looked at me. So what now? You can sue me for assault. You do have witnesses. He nodded towards Bob and Jack. I laughed. Come on. How do I explain to the police that I'm sitting here drinking beer with you? No, I don't think so. If you don't come to me with a bat anymore, then I won't go to the police either. No, I won't, he replied. Now that I know the whole story, everything is different. I thought I had it bad, but your story is much worse. But still, where do we go next? I was a little surprised. Why should we move somewhere? In my opinion, everything was clear. The conversation was over. It was time to move on. Pete looked at me. You see, I'm still full of anger. Perhaps you understand this. I was going to take it out on you. I'm glad I didn't do it, but the anger remains. I need to get rid of her so I can move on and decide what to do. I understood his pain. Despite the fact that we knew each other for only a short time, I liked him. I wasn't sure about Ron yet, even though he brought beer. Mutual sympathy may not have developed yet. Listen, tomorrow morning I will book a place in the cricket nets. Why don't you come with me and let off some steam by hitting some balls? I will serve them to you, and you can beat as much as you can until you get tired. Pete thought for a moment and then agreed. I invited Ron to join too, but he refused. Unfortunately, it didn't work. When we arrived at the cricket field, I expected that Pete, since he is a good golfer, would be able to hit the ball easily. But it turned out that he was completely unable to hit a moving ball. 10 minutes later, he was already very irritated. It didn't take a psychologist to understand that this method was not helping him. His anger only grew. I stopped training and we went for coffee. I invited him to play golf with me. I thought that concentrating on the game might calm him down. Pete had never played on my course, and this could be a new challenge for him. I wanted to joke that he would definitely be able to hit a stationary ball, but that would hardly have made him laugh. We made a reservation for the same day. When we started playing, it became obvious that Pete was much better than me. His blows were accurate and powerful. He began to calm down, even gave me advice, which, by the way, worked well. But on the 10th hole he cut the ball, and it flew into the forest next to Ferveen. The ball went far. I hit my ball, and it also flew that way. Pete said that he would go look for his ball, and he suggested that I continue playing. I heard sounds like someone was clearing the undergrowth with a stick. I focused on my game and hit the ball. Then he headed into the woods to help Pete find his ball. And then I heard a loud scream, followed by the sound of something hard being hit, and then another scream. It was Pete. I felt like he might be the target of his own rage, and knowing that he had a golf club in his hands, I didn't want to be around him in that state. After a few minutes, everything became quiet. I carefully approached the place where the sounds were coming from and heard crying. I found Pete sitting hugging his knees with his back pressed against a tree. He cried bitterly. I didn't know what to do, but I understood his pain. I walked up to him, sat down next to him, and hugged him in a friendly way. He burst into tears even more. I myself would like someone to support me at such a moment. After a while, he fell silent and took a deep breath. I stood up and walked back to the fairway without saying anything. A couple of minutes later, Pete came out of the woods, his eyes red. He raised his stick, which was now curved. I think I'll need a new putter, he said with a sad smile. He had to play the rest of the game with his biggest stick. Despite this, he still beat me. When we returned to the club, his eyes were almost back to normal. We didn't mention the incident, but it was clear that he had become more calm. Over a cup of coffee, we discussed some of the difficult holes, trying not to mention the 10th. When we got to the cars, Pete extended his hand to me. Next week on my field, I answered doubtfully. You will need to find a nanny for the children. What day and time? Let me know. We exchanged phone numbers. I didn't mention that Jackie already had my number. Pete called me on Tuesday and asked me to play golf on Sunday. He mentioned that if I couldn't find a babysitter, Jackie's sister, Janice, had offered to watch the children. I didn't tell him that I'd already met Janice. After we agreed on a time, Pete hesitated and asked, "What should I do?" He clearly wasn't asking about golf. This was not a matter that could be discussed over the phone. We agreed to meet on Wednesday evening at a pub where neither he nor I usually go. I have many friends, he began, but I cannot ask them for advice. This will show how bad a situation I am. I don't want to air my dirty laundry in public, even in front of my friends. I'm completely confused. He was right. It is impossible to understand what someone is going through unless you have been through it yourself. Even if you have experience, each such test is unique. I can tell you the options, I said, but it's up to you. I don't know what's in your heart. You'll have to decide for yourself what's best for you, Ben and Katie. If you divorce her, you'll become a part-time dad, pay child support, and still won't see them as much as you'd like. There is a risk that she will find another man, and he will become a new father for them who will spend more time with your children than you. It's just reality. Another option is to wait until the children grow up and then get a divorce. But then there is a risk that you will get used to her and forgive her. Or you can try to sort out the problems and contact a family counselor. You'll need to figure out whether your life will be better with or without her. And finally, the big question. Can you trust her again if you decide to stay together? He listened to me carefully, and then he asked the question I was most afraid of. What would you do if you were in my place? I'm not in your place, friend. My situation is completely different. I took a long sip of beer and continued. I would look into my heart and set my priorities. Who is more important to you, yourself or your children? Where is Jackie in this diagram? And when you understand this, you can move on. I don't envy you, it's not easy. My situation was clear. Sorry, I couldn't help more. He drank his beer thoughtfully. I have to ask, was it good? Crap. Pete, let's not get into this. I paused. But I understand what you need to know. If I were you, I would also like to know. I won't go into details. I'll just say that it wasn't something out of the ordinary, no fetish, no exoticism. It was a relationship between two people in love having sex. I'm sorry, friend. She never spoke ill of you, I added. She always said that you were a great father and a wonderful lover. She never compared us. At least she didn't say it out loud. And that's good. I felt his pain again, familiar to me. Pete sat and considered my words, looking into his mug. Thank you, he said quietly. I think this is exactly what I needed to hear. He suddenly raised his head. You called me friend. Are we friends now? I haven't thought about it, I said, shrugging. But we're sitting here, you're asking for my advice, and I'm trying to help. That's what friends do, isn't it? It's just a shame I can't give you more helpful answers. Pete looked at me with a sad smile. You have no idea how much you helped. I don't feel so alone anymore. You did not give exact answers to my questions, but you showed the direction, and I must figure it out myself. He suddenly became sad. I just wanted Jackie and I to have a better future. But in the end, he made the present even worse. If she hadn't met you, we might not have lived to see the future I tried to create. Strange, isn't it? We hadn't finished the beer yet, but Pete got up and went for another portion. This was a sign that he needed time to digest everything we were talking about. When he returned, we were talking not about personal things, but about golf, cricket, and the weather. He admitted that he didn't understand the rules of cricket, and I couldn't explain them properly. His ability to miss a moving ball in the cricket nets confirmed this. I invited him to watch the match next summer. I've already been to his golf course in Gravesend. It's always nice to play on a new course. At about 9:30, he excused himself, saying that he had to order a taxi. I hope he wasn't planning on driving, as he was clearly in no condition. My ex-mother-in-law was supposed to come pick me up. Her family was sure I was seeing someone new. They wanted me to move on after the divorce and supported me in every possible way. We finished our beer. At about 10 o'clock in the evening, a car horn sounded on the street. One long beep and two short ones. Sounded like a signal to someone. Pete stood up. This is my car. Give me a couple of minutes. I stood up, we shook hands, and he left. But I didn't give him those couple minutes. I followed him, trying not to attract attention, and looked out the door. It was Jackie. She came to pick him up. I had a feeling that she knew about our meeting. I was confused, but honestly, it wasn't that hard in my current situation. And then it happened. In a city of nearly 300,000 people covering 80 square miles, you don't expect to run into the person you want to avoid. I don't often shop at Marks and Spencer, but Sandra asked me to pick up a cake for a baby shower she was throwing for Harry and Beth. It was a special order. Boats were depicted on the cake. I turned the corner and Jackie was standing there. A wave of anger washed over me instantly and with incredible force. I was about to turn around and leave when I suddenly felt her hand on my shoulder. I wanted to push her hand away, forgetting about politeness. "Please have coffee with me," she asked. "Please." I looked at her. My face must have contorted with anger because she added, "I'll ask Pete for permission." And before I could say no, which I was about to do, she had already dialed his number and I heard her phone ringing. To my surprise, Pete answered almost immediately. "Pete, I met Jeff by chance at M&S. Can I have coffee with him?" she said. There was a muffled answer, and she put the phone on speaker before handing it to me. "He wants to talk to you," she said with only her lips. "Hello, Jeff. How are you, friend? This must be hard for you." "Yes," I answered briefly. "I trust you," Pete said. "But it's up to you to decide. Look, we've become friends, and maybe you two should still talk in a neutral setting. This may help clear things up, but it's up to you." "Okay, I'll think about it," I replied. "Just make sure to be careful. Her little sister Janice is with her. She has a weakness for older men. If Jackie likes you, then Janice will like you too. You're just her type," he added with a slight laugh. "See you on Sunday at 1 o'clock. The conversation was over. I looked at Janice. Her face was flushed. "Okay, you're the treat," I said. "Thank you," Jackie replied. She tried to touch me again, but I retreated. The anger was still bubbling inside, and I was clearly not ready for forgiveness. As we walked towards the cafe, it occurred to me that this whole meeting might have been planned. I don't usually go to this store, but Sandra asked me to pick up a cake. Special order. I grabbed the cake and was about to head to the checkout through the liquor section to see what they had on sale. And then I met Jackie. Although there were other M&S stores nearby where she could have bought smoked salmon, she ended up in this one. But Sandra didn't know Jackie. This couldn't have been faked, and the look of shock on Janice's face was genuine. So this is fate. I decided to go with the flow. Jackie went for coffee. Janice asked quietly, "Are you okay?" "No," I blurted out. Her face turned pale. I felt like a bastard. "Sorry," I said. "It was rude. You have nothing to do with it. You're only trying to help. Sorry." I tried to smile, but to no avail. As we waited, I wondered why I had agreed to this meeting in the first place. What's the point? Who am I doing this to? For yourself? For Pete? Definitely not for Jackie. Pete was right. Sooner or later, we will have to meet in society. Perhaps this was a good chance to talk on neutral territory where no one knew us. I received Jackie's explanation in her letter, but I never took my anger out on her. Damn, she broke my heart for the second time in 2 years. What a stupid, gullible idiot I was. She deserved everything I had to say. Jackie returned with a tray of drinks. When she put the tea in front of me, she said quietly, "Sorry, it's not too hot." I took a sip and winced. She was right. You wanted this, the word is yours. I wanted to apologize personally. This got me thinking perhaps it was a setup after all. But how? For what? I asked. For hurting you, for lying, for deceiving. She squeezed her sister's hand. Not to break my heart again. Yes, and for this too. I should have stopped everything when you told me about your divorce, but I couldn't. I loved you, I was weak. You wrote in the letter that you love your husband. I like Pete, he's a good person. What did he do wrong? He was just trying to provide a future for you and the children. What did we do wrong that you could do this to both of us? You say you love us both. You had to choose, but you couldn't choose me because of what Sandra did. That's why you stayed with Pete. Why didn't you just leave knowing how I felt? He ignored me. Everything was more important to him than me. The kids, his boss, the damn job, and that damn golf, she screamed. He didn't want to listen to me. Then she added more quietly, with tears in her eyes. You didn't do anything wrong. I just couldn't give up on you. It wasn't about the sex, it was about you. Oh, great, now I'm also bad in bed. No, you are wonderful, but love is not only sex. She was right. There was a man in a formal suit standing next to our table with a security guard behind him. I didn't notice him until he spoke. Sorry, but I will have to ask you to leave the establishment. Immediately. You are disturbing our customers. I stood up and walked out, heading to the far corner of the parking lot. I was seething with anger. Meeting with her did not improve the situation, but made everything worse. I wanted to find a trash can to kick it, but damn, they were all concrete. I was angry, but not that stupid. I sat down on the curb, put my head in my hands, and tried to slow my breathing. I heard two men in high heels walking quickly across the parking lot. Damn it, why can't she leave me alone? I was about to scream when I looked up and saw it was Janice, and Jackie was walking a few steps behind her. Janice sat next to me and took my hand. I wanted to push her away. At that moment, I didn't want anything to do with the women from this family. But that would be rude, and I try not to be rude. Sometimes I can do it, and this was one of those times. I just moved away from her. She remained where she was. Jeff, Janice began, please don't drive in this condition. You will get into an accident, and everyone who loves you and needs you will be left without a wonderful person. Please. Damn it, she was right. I looked up. Jackie stood nearby. She looked terrible, looking at her shoes. I raised my gun again and blurted out, you couldn't get the emotions you needed at home, so you used your lovers. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the surprised look on Janice's face when I said the plural lovers. And you didn't even give your husband a chance, didn't talk to him about what was wrong. You just gave up and took the easy way out. You make me sick. Your cowardice and unwillingness to accept reality and make a decision have hurt the people you say you love most in the world, your husband, children, and even your sister. I told you how much my wife's betrayal hurt me, and you still continued to cheat on your husband. And the worst thing is with me. I paused to take a breath, and I thought I loved you. This made her raise her head. You never said. Guess what? I was afraid of commitment, and it looks like I was right. She knows she hurt you, Janice interjected. I'm not important to her, obviously. If I was important, she would have left after she admitted that she was married, and I told her what Sandra had done. I felt Janice's hand on my shoulder. I looked at her. For the first time since Jackie brought the drinks, I looked at her properly. She cried as much as Jackie. That's not true, Jackie said. I was lonely, Pete was always away. I thought I was safe in Portsmouth. Until I met you, you changed everything. Now it's my fault, right? No, it's not so, fool. I was stupid and fell in love with you. After everything we'd been through, I wanted to believe her. I said quietly, how can I trust a single word you say? How can I trust any woman after this? Two women I loved both lied to me and cheated on me. You both hurt me. How can I trust another woman again? In 2 years, I have been betrayed by you twice. I'm probably an idiot. I'm sure the whole world is laughing at what a fool I was. That's what you took away from me, trust in all women. It's surprising that I don't hate women at all. Janice touched my shoulder. Please don't do this, Jeff. You're too good a person for that. Jackie squared her shoulders, her face flooded with tears. I'm sorry, this shouldn't have happened. Nothing can be fixed, but I didn't use you. I love you. You're right, I was a coward. I'm so sorry. Having said this, she turned around and left. Janice hugged my arm. I wanted to push her away, but I was too exhausted after this tirade. I heard her say quietly, you have my number on the back of the envelope. Text me when you get home, okay? I simply nodded. She gave me a slight smile, mouthed, sorry, and hurried after her sister. I finally calmed down. Still felt terrible, but it got better. It seems that I have poured out most of what has accumulated in my soul. Now all I have to do is remember where the damn cake is. I stood up, took a deep breath, and saw a white box sitting on the curb next to where I was sitting. Great, it saved me the awkwardness of having to go back to the store or explain to Sandra why I didn't buy a cake, and more importantly, explain to the kids why they wouldn't have their favorite cake at the party. I drove home, washed and cleaned myself up in time to pick up Beth and Gary from the bus stop. I even thought about texting Janice, but in the end I decided I wouldn't. To hell with them. I was fine. I myself knew that I got home safe and sound. When I returned after picking up the children from the bus, an unfamiliar car was parked on the street outside my house. We rarely have strangers on the street unless the main road is blocked. As I approached the house, I saw Janice get out of the car. I felt remorse. Nodding to her, I promised that I would write or call, but I didn't. I just waved slightly and smiled at her. She responded with a smile, got into the car, and drove away. Later that evening, Pete called me and asked me to play a round of golf. He was good, probably due to constant training with his boss. He was clearly better than me. He often gave me advice, and I became a better person. But usually, when inviting me to a game, Pete had a different goal, he had a question. However, this time everything was different. After the game at the club, he told me that he and Jackie were seeing a marriage counselor. She admitted that although both of them were to blame for their problems, the main responsibility lay with her. He asked how the meeting with Jackie and Janice went. I told him that the conversation was tense, but we both expressed everything that was on our hearts. Anyway, I did it, but I didn't want to talk about it anymore. It was all in the past. He said the girls said the same thing. He seemed to accept it, although he was not happy, but he had no choice. It seemed to me that he wanted to share what they had learned in the consultation. He didn't blame me for what happened between me and his wife. Now I became his friend, and I was the only one he could talk to. Anyway, he bought beer. Part of the reason she cheated on him was because life had become monotonous, and they had lost their sense of adventure. Work, Pete seeking a promotion, and children, all this led to the fact that there was no room for risk and challenge. Life stagnated. They both admitted that they had become lazy. They decided to try again. Pete changed his behavior. He began to work less and devote more time to the family as a whole, and not just to the children. She promised that if problems arise, she will not hush them up, but will insist on discussing them without pushing them under the rug. They both seemed to have learned something. He admitted to me that he made a promise to himself. If Jackie took even one step aside, he would leave as soon as Katie and Ben grew up. If she keeps her promise, as she wrote to me in a letter, he will stay with her. I would be happy for them if this happens. Pete asked me a question. Were you the only one? Crap. It seems Jackie never confessed to Pete about the other men. Janice didn't know if I was telling the truth or just being mean. This was a risk Jackie would now have to live with. It seems that she pushed them out of her memory and forgot about them. As far as I know, there were no others. I lied. To tell him what the bartender John told me would be to destroy him all over again. Whether this was the right choice for Jackie, I don't know. But damn it, now I was lying for her, using the excuse that I was protecting Pete and the kids. Pete stopped traveling so much and gave up golf tournaments. He now played only in the mornings or evenings. It was a choice, golf or marriage to the woman he loved. When Jackie went to Portsmouth, he went with her several times. It seems they were staying at a different hotel. I still felt lonely, and after Sandra and Jackie, I had no desire to start a new relationship. Now I understand that what stopped me was the fear of falling in love again and being betrayed again. It was the end of the summer holidays, and I was again leading excursions. Maeve called me from the reception and asked if I could give a special tour. I was asked personally. If I couldn't, the group would leave and wait until I was free, perhaps returning another day. This interested me. Was it a group of old acquaintances who decided to laugh at me, or was it Jackie and Ben? She said he liked submarines. I was still thinking about her. I couldn't forget her. When I entered the ticket office, I realized that I was right. I immediately recognized Pete, Jackie, and Janice, even from behind. I assumed that the two children with them were Ben and Katie. I've never seen them. There was a desire to turn around and leave, but this could upset the children. I was sure that Ben had been promised a tour. Pete and Jackie knew I wouldn't want to let the kids down. Janice turned around and saw me, her face lit up with a smile. This decided my fate. I would give the tour. She turned and said something to the others. They turned and looked at me. Jackie looked very nervous. Pete walked up to me, holding out his hand. I shook it, and he patted me on the shoulder. Stopping me, he said, "Before we begin, I want to thank you for all your help. We've met several times already, but I never thanked you for the help you gave me. Thank you. Now let's go meet the children." I was introduced to Ben and Katie. They turned out to be pleasant, polite, and well-behaved children. I started the tour with HM's Gannet, a sailing ship. I showed them a lot of interesting things, but focused on the living conditions. Showed the difference between the cabins of the captain, officers, and sailors. He explained that the captain sometimes received guests on the ship, and therefore he had a large cabin. Sometimes they took their wives with them on trips. We then moved on to HMS Cavalier, a World War II destroyer. I told more about weapons and again about living conditions. Once again, the captain's cabin was better than the rest. Ben liked guns. Then we moved on to HMS Ocelot, a submarine. This is what really impressed them. I had to explain what a hotbed was. The children understood everything right away, but the adults, not so much. They had dirty thoughts. Janice looked into the captain's cabin. "There's not much to roam around here. I doubt he took his wife with him," she giggled. "There's not much room to do. You know what?" She giggled again. An idea came to my mind. Looking at Pete and Jackie, I said in a serious voice, "I was in that cabin that Janice is talking about. There's a lock on the door. Why don't you tell me what can be done there? You have about 12 minutes until the next excursion." I looked at my watch. It was a lie. There was no next excursion. People could accidentally walk in, but that was unlikely. I didn't expect Jackie to grab Pete's hand so quickly and drag him to the captain's cabin. I even heard the lock click. I looked at Janice. Her mouth was open in surprise. I said, as if nothing had happened, "Let's take Ben and Katie to the torpedo room. I think Ben will be interested in seeing where the torpedoes are stored." About 15 minutes later, a blushing Jackie and a smiling Pete returned to us. Pete winked at me. I just smiled back. We have completed the tour. The kids were delighted, especially Ben, who couldn't stop talking about the submarine. He'll obviously be talking about it at school and at Scouts on Tuesday. I thought it polite to escort them back to the cash register. On the way, Pete asked the kids if they wanted ice cream. What a stupid question for kids. The three of them walked towards the ice cream stand. The kids in front. Pete took a couple of steps, then stopped and extended his hand to Jackie. Apparently, their relationship was still in the recovery stage. She smiled and took his hand. Pete turned to us and asked, "Maybe I should buy you some ice cream too." "Thanks, but no, I'm at work." Janice chimed in. "He needs it, and if his bosses start grumbling, I'll deal with them myself." I noticed that we had slowed down. Janice came up to me and took my arm. I tried to pull away, saying, "I'm at work. It doesn't look good." She held me back, telling me not to be so strict. While we walked, I had time to think. I told her, "You arranged everything, right?" She simply nodded. "For what?" "Pete wanted to thank you properly. Ben loves ships and boats, especially underwater ones, and I really wanted to meet you again and couldn't think of any other way." The others caught up with us, and Ben and Katie brought us ice cream. We thanked them. Pete and Jackie, noticing that we were walking hand in hand, took the children a little further. I tried to free myself from Janice again, but she wouldn't let go and I didn't want to make a scene. To be honest, I even liked it, although I understood that I might be scolded at work. Of course, because walking arm in arm with a client and eating ice cream is not the best look for an employee. We reached the ticket office, and I escorted them to the exit. As I walked past the counter, I noticed Maeve wave and wink at me with a big smile on her face. I opened the door for them. Janice was the last one to leave. She stopped and addressed me in a serious voice. Jeff, I didn't like it. Can I ask you a favor? I nodded. Can I invite you to dinner tonight? I know Sandra is with Beth and Gary now. You can't use them as an excuse. She continued. Star Hotel, Maidstone Street, 19 o'clock, if you want everything military style. If I agree, you won't be able to book a table. I've already booked everything. There was confidence in her voice, although I felt a little anxious. I think she was afraid that I would say no. This saved me from having to cook or order takeout. Yes, I answered. She smiled, and it was a pleasant smile. I can recommend taking a taxi. Parking in Chatham in the evening is terrible. She was right. I decided that I would go by bus. It was cheaper. But what to wear? The same question bothered me the first time I went to dinner with her sister. But now the choice of establishment gave me a hint. Flannel trousers, shirt, tie, and jacket. She was already there when I arrived. Buses do not always run on time. I was glad I wore what I chose. She looked amazing. It wasn't quite a little black dress, but something close to it. Her hair shone almost as much as the smile that lit up her face when I walked in. You're a little late. I was already starting to worry that you wouldn't come. The bus was delayed. It's quite a long drive from my house, and there's always the possibility of delays. I won't let you take the bus back. I'll have to take you home. I wonder how she thought I'd get home. Or was it a cunning plan to keep me from taking the car? The similarities between her and her sister became more and more obvious. I planned to take a taxi. Over dinner, I told her about the kids, my time in the Navy, and all the places I'd been. She talked about her work as a clothing designer. This surprised me. Not high fashion, but regular everyday items that you can buy on the high street. She always dreamed of creating something outstanding that would attract the attention of major fashion houses. But over time, I realized that this would not happen, and came to terms with this fact. However, she earned enough to afford the lifestyle she wanted and was able to work from home. Chasing her dream came at a social cost. She had few friends, and the men around her were mostly only interested for one reason. And I was not surprised she was beautiful. I didn't notice how time flew by. When dinner came to an end, I took out my phone to order a taxi. But Janice said, I would like to take you home, if possible. This is part of my gratitude for helping Pete and Jackie. It would be stupid to refuse, and I wondered where this was all leading. She drove the car confidently, although a little harshly, a little too much gas, then a sharp brake, but overall safely. I invited her for coffee, and she agreed. Having put the kettle on, I took out 2 mugs. She sat at the kitchen table and watched me. And then, without warning, she got up, went into the back room, and returned with a bottle of Old Speckled Hen and Crafty Old Hen. She picked them up and said, I don't know which one you like better, but I think you'll prefer one of them instead of coffee. I chose Old Speckled Hen, which is not as strong as Crafty. I smiled, holding out my hand for the bottle. Are you trying to get me drunk so you can seduce me later? No, I don't want you to be drunk when we get to this. She was as straightforward as her sister, and this was not surprising, but it was a little disturbing. How similar are they? She continued to tell her story, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug. She was set to marry her longtime fiancé in a few months, and was sitting at her desk at work when her next costume design was rejected. At that moment, it dawned on her. She would never become a big fashion star. She decided to go home and think about her future. But when she arrived, her life changed dramatically. She caught her fiancé in bed with his boss. And although she thought that 2 women kissing was sexy, seeing 2 men, one of whom was her fiancé, was disgusting to her. We sat in silence for a while. I could no longer hold back the question. Why? She looked a little puzzled, which was my goal. Why what? Why did you invite me to dinner? And say the real reason, not just thank you. Jackie said it wouldn't work. She took a deep breath. When I brought the letter and phone, I saw a broken man who was trying to do everything possible for his children after he was wounded by 2 women. After what Jackie told me about you, I knew you could do it. It will be difficult, but you can do it. Jackie said that you can be tough and determined when necessary. I don't know why, but I felt proud of you, although I didn't even know you. You could have slammed the door in my face when I brought the phone and the letter, but you invited me into the house. One might say you welcomed me warmly. I've been watching you for a few days to make sure you're okay. I understood why Jackie fell in love with you. She and I are similar. We both loved the same boys at school, she sighed. That sometimes causes problems. I know that you will now have difficulty trusting women, especially women from our family. She covered my hand with hers. If Jackie liked you, then I would like you too. If you like Jackie, maybe I'll like you too, and I wanted to give it a try. I really like you. It's very simple. I didn't think it was that simple. My head was spinning. I wanted to change the subject. I asked Janice, was the meeting at Mark's Spencer planned? She looked at me with bewilderment. I continued, there are 5 stores where you can buy smoked salmon, and this one was the furthest from your house. And I could only buy the cake in that store. Oh, that's what you're talking about. No, of course, this was not planned. We could not calculate the time in advance. Jackie has my phone number. She could have tracked me. I always leave it on so kids, grandmas, and even Sandra can find me. We were just going to the garden center in that shopping park, so we did some shopping together. Please trust me. I understand that this is difficult for you, but try. It was fate. She fell silent for a while. It's good that you agreed. Well, actually, it was bad. It was painful on all sides to see you suffer after what she did to you. It was obvious how much you loved her, and how I was. Well, what a fool I was. She touched me again. From what I heard, it wasn't the same as breaking up with your wife. She was, well, just having fun on the side, and Jackie had problems. I was about to say something, but she raised her hand to stop me. Then I noticed that her right hand was still on mine. Yes, I know that she chose the wrong way to solve them. She was wrong. I wanted to change the subject again. We were silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts. I had one more question. I don't know much about genetics, but Jackie has dark hair, and so do her children. And yours are light. You and her are so similar that it's almost like twins. Is this your natural hair color? This question made her smile. No, it's from a bottle, she answered in a serious tone. After I heard about you from Jackie and realized that we were so similar, I decided to become a blonde so as not to scare you when I came with a letter and a phone number. I thought it was very thoughtful of her. This showed that she had empathy. It's time for me to go, she said. Tomorrow I'll look after Ben and Katie while Pete and Jackie go shopping. Can't they take the children with them? Not for the clothes they are going to buy. It was clear from my face that I did not understand. Jackie has boring underwear. And don't say that you didn't. She stopped, realizing that she had entered dangerous territory. Sorry, I have to go. I walked her to the door and opened it. The moment of choice has come. Shake hands, kiss on the cheek, on the lips. What to do? The evening was amazing, and I didn't want to ruin it by saying goodbye. She tilted her cheek. Great, one of us has made a decision. But when I leaned in, she turned her head and our lips met. She carefully released herself from my embrace, her face flushed. I had a wonderful evening. Can we meet again soon? I have children next week. In a week? Next week will be great. I'd like to meet Gary and Beth. She kissed the tip of my nose and walked to the car, opening it along the way. I waited until she reached the end of the street. I sat down at the kitchen table, pulled out a bottle of crafty old hen, and began to reflect on the events of the day. I really was in love with Jackie. Janice looks so much like her. Have they decided to bring us together? I really liked Janice. But was it all a setup? And if so, was I against it? I thought about it. I was worried. Would I allow myself to be manipulated? And if I knew about possible manipulation, could it be called manipulation? I thought a little and decided that yes, it is possible. But I won't let them control me, let them think that they succeeded. I wanted to get to the bottom of this. I don't mind being pushed a little if that's the road I want to go down. But do I want to go down the road with another woman from this family? I decided to approach this with an open heart. During the week, I called Pete and suggested we arrange a dinner for the four of us on Friday, somewhere closer to my home. I told him it would be a good idea to have an informal chat with Jackie and Janice before we all got together at some golf club. I mentioned that I could control my anger at Jackie if he and Janice were around. Pete replied that he understood what I was talking about. Jackie and Pete had to find nannies, but everything was organized for Friday. My parents took my children in with them. I managed to book a table at a nice restaurant by the river. The atmosphere was calm. Jackie was very nervous at the beginning of the evening, but gradually calmed down. I tried and was even polite to her. We talked about children and work. Pete and Jackie talked a little about how their sessions with the family psychologist are going. We had just finished dessert when I realized the moment had come. Pete enjoyed the taste of his beer, and Jackie took a small sip of wine. I decided to take advantage of the moment and suddenly said, "So you all conspired to set me up with Janice." Pete choked on his beer, and Jackie almost choked on her wine, which immediately went down her throat. She started coughing, and I lightly patted her on the back. When she was finally able to catch her breath, Pete stood up and extended his hand to Jackie. "We need to leave you two alone. Let's go get some new drinks." Jackie reached out and gently stroked her sister's hand. She said quietly, "Good luck." Then she looked at me and smiled. She stood up and left after Pete. Janice turned her chair so she was sitting directly in front of me, and I did the same. She took my hands, looked at me seriously, and said, "To answer your question, yes and no." Now I was even more confused. She continued, "Jackie told me a lot about you. You are a kind, caring, and sympathetic person. You are cheerful and passionate." She blushed slightly when she said the last part. I wondered what would happen next. Jackie didn't go into details, but she said that you are very good at intimacy. Or rather, she said that you are simply magnificent. I felt my face flush. When I came to deliver the letter, I saw how much she hurt you. She reassured me that she truly loved you and that she was sorry for the pain she caused. She wanted to somehow make amends, so she asked me to help. Initially, my task was only to deliver the letter, but when I saw a beautiful but broken man struggling to cope after having his heart broken for the second time, something inside me changed. At the time, I didn't know all the details of your divorce, only that it was difficult and brought you a lot of pain. I just saw an injured man in front of me. Later, I drove past your house again and noticed that something had changed. Your car was now clean, your front lawn was mowed. When I saw you that morning, I just wanted to hug you. Jackie told me so much about you that I felt like I already knew you, and seeing the person she destroyed in front of her was very painful. I just wanted to help. I saw you go for a short run, and later they brought you food. You looked different, more confident. I believe the letter helped you. I shook my head. At that time, I had not read it yet. I was just working up the courage to do it. Other things changed me. She raised an eyebrow in surprise, but I motioned for her to continue. She took a sip of wine before continuing. "I liked what I saw, and after what Jackie told me, I wanted to get to know you better. I spoke to Jackie again, and she told me everything she knew, even the details of your divorce. I asked her if she thought I had a chance with you. She suggested talking to Pete. At first, he was against this idea. He likes you, even though he thinks you're a terrible golfer. He didn't want you to get hurt again. But then he suggested that we meet and see what happens next. And he gave advice. Don't use sex to influence your opinion. I remember how he looked at Jackie and she started crying. They were still trying to make things work back then. They're still working on it. When Ben said he wanted to go to the shipyard, we had an idea. So I organized everything. Yes, it was planned. But then everything went by itself. So yes, the shipyard was a kind of setup. But everything else is just us trying to get to know each other. She straightened up, removing her hands from mine. Jeff, if you want to leave, I understand. But I will be very upset. And I have to tell you the truth. I am falling in love with you, and I hope that you feel something for me too. I think you do, judging by the way you kissed and held me last week when I left you." Her words touched on something that had been bothering me for a long time, but I tried to suppress it. Do I feel something for her? Yes, I feel it. But what scared me was how much she looked like Jackie. Most of these similarities are what I loved about Jackie. But where do these similarities end? Is Janice capable of doing the same as her sister? That's what haunted me. I took her hands in mine and said, "First of all, I'm not going anywhere." She smiled. "And yes, I have feelings for you. You look so much like your sister. I loved her. How can I not feel something for you? But where does your similarity end? She cheated on her husband, whom she claims to love. I'm afraid you might do the same if I fall in love with you. That's why I try not to fall in love, even though it's difficult, because I really like you. I enjoy spending time with you. Gary and Beth will love you too, but I don't want to risk putting them through pain again." She moved away from me, her eyes slightly moist. At that moment, Pete looked into the room with drinks in his hands. He noticed the situation, looked at us, and silently walked back to the bar. Janice carefully wiped her eyes with a napkin. Then she looked me straight in the eyes. "What happened to them will not happen to us. They both made mistakes, but we can learn from those mistakes." Pete was too busy working, trying to get promoted. He tried to make up for his absence, but he thought that since Jackie wasn't complaining, everything was fine. She complained, he admitted it, but he didn't listen. She was unhappy, and she began to suspect that he was cheating because he spent too much time outside the house and was constantly tired. By the way, he didn't cheat on her, she just thought so. This will most likely come up in their consultations. The problem was that they didn't communicate. I understand it was a difficult time for them. It's at times like these that you need to put in more effort, and they didn't. Jackie should have been more persistent, perhaps even threatened divorce, then maybe he would have listened to her. We will not allow this. I've already been betrayed. I know it's a risk, but I'm ready to accept it. I will always be honest with you, even if I have to say something you don't like. Perhaps we will separate for other reasons. Money, politics, religion, or maybe we will be sexually incompatible. You may like something that I won't like. Although, judging by Jackie's words, this is unlikely, she smiled. I felt the tension ease a little. I looked at her. She was beautiful not only in appearance, but also as a person. At that moment, I made a decision. We will never know if we will succeed if we don't try. And this is what I decided to tell her. I smiled, and she noticed it, a look of relief showing on her face. I said directly, "Janice, we both have a lot of baggage, both from the past and from the present, but we will never know if we will succeed if we don't try." I was brave. "See if there is a room here for the night." She jumped up, jumped onto my lap, and kissed me. The entire restaurant fell silent and looked at us. She wrapped her arms around my shoulders, and I hugged her. When we pulled away, she said quietly, "No, for the first time, I want to wake up in your arms, in your bed, in your house," she said quietly, looking into my eyes. At this point, I noticed Pete and Jackie returning to our table, both with smiles on their faces. They seemed to already understand how events were developing. When they sat down, Pete, narrowing his eyes slyly, looked at me and said, "You accused us of setting something up, and you lured us here, inspired a false sense of security, and posted my question while we were both drinking. Sly guy, you made me spit out my beer." I laughed. "That probably only improved the taste of this beer." He smiled in response, and there was a short silence at the table. I saw Jackie eager to ask questions, but didn't know where to start. Luckily, Janice took matters into her own hands. Turning to Pete and Jackie, she asked, "Can I ask you a favor?" Without waiting for an answer, she continued, "I don't have my own car. I came with you. Jeff arrived by bus. Could you give us a ride home?" Pete instantly replied, "Of course, Jackie is driving." She only drank one glass of wine. Well, not even a whole glass, considering that she spilled it all over the table. We finished our drinks, and it was time to go. We got into the car, and Jackie carefully pulled out onto the road. A few minutes later, she turned on her turn signal to turn toward Janice's house. But then Janice suddenly leaned forward and asked, "If it's not too much trouble, can you take us to Raynham?" Jackie hesitated and looked at Pete, who looked a little stunned. He came to his senses and nodded. "I don't mind." Apparently, sooner or later, I will still have to go there to beat him at golf again. I knew it was not an easy decision for him to go back to the place where his wife had once cheated on him, even though this man was now his friend. When we arrived at my house, I again tried to make everything simpler and suggested, "You can just drop us off at the corner. It can be difficult to leave this street at night." Pete shook his head. "Nonsense," he said firmly. "We will seat you right at your door." When we pulled up at my house, I walked up to his side of the car and Pete rolled down the window. I extended my hand, but he opened the door and went out. He smiled and said, "You know that I don't shake hands while sitting in a car." I realized that this was difficult for him. Instead of shaking hands, I moved closer and hugged him. It was a big man's hug, and when I let go, I said, "Pete, you are an incredibly strong and brave man. I couldn't do what you just did. Take care of yourself." On the other side of the car, Jackie and Janice were also exchanging hugs. I wonder what they were talking about. Pete looked at me and said, "We'll wait until you close the door before we leave." I realized that this was almost a hint to hurry up. I walked to the other side of the car to pull Janice away from her sister, Jackie, and I simply shook hands, which seemed strange to me, considering everything that had happened to us before. I led Janice to the front door, and as we said goodbye to Pete and Jackie, she took off her coat and just dropped it on the floor. I didn't have time to pick it up because she immediately hugged me and kissed me. Our previous kisses were tender, but this one was full of fire and passion. We pulled away to catch our breath. I smiled and asked, "Tea, coffee, or wine?" "Bed," she said quietly, taking my hand and leading me up the stairs straight to my bedroom. I fell asleep with a feeling of satisfaction. In the morning, she put on my shirt, which I wore last night, without buttoning it, and lace panties. She made tea and toast. Sitting with her at the kitchen table, eating blackcurrant toast and drinking tea was very pleasant. I had to wipe a drop of jam from her cheeks several times. I asked, "So why me? What made you choose me?" Like I said, after Jackie told me so much about you, I felt like I already knew you. I saw a broken man in front of me. I just wanted to hug you. I wanted to help. Jackie thought you could handle it with the kids around. But when you were alone, we watched Sandra pick up the children. We asked Pete to keep you busy for a bit. This helped Pete too. He was coming home pretty calm after playing golf with you. The plan was for Jackie and I to somehow gradually come into your life. For example, to meet you after playing golf or to see you at the club. But the idea came up with a meeting at the docks so that you would feel in your element. Pete quickly realized what we were up to and warned us to be careful. He likes you. And then she stunned me. "When are Gary and Beth getting back from your parents? I need to pick them up at 11 and stay for lunch. Can I come with you and meet them if that's okay? You can take me home after this if you want." "I would like to. I better warn Mom and Dad. I plan to take you home first and then pick them up." I called my mother and said that I would bring someone with me, a woman. She was pleased. I said I'd be there at 11, and then Janice started waving her arms. I asked my mother to wait and covered the microphone with my finger. I always have trouble finding the mute button. "I can't meet your parents and children in the dress I wore yesterday. It won't be right. We need to pop into the store and buy something decent." "Mom, we might be a little late. We need to do some shopping." "Okay, I'll see you when you get there. Should I warn the kids about your friend?" I didn't think about it. "Yes, please, Mom, so it doesn't come as a shock to them. Sorry, I have to run. See you." I hung up. Janice said, "I need to call Jackie and see if she's okay after last night." "Okay, I have to make a call as soon as I get dressed too." I was halfway up the stairs when I realized I hadn't asked Janice if she wanted to use my toothbrush. I returned to the first floor and heard them both talking on the phone. Janice must have turned on the video call. How did it go when you got home? Everything is fine. I was a little worried about you, Janice asked. Everything is fine. Pete was very quiet on the road. Pause. He was a little rough when we. Are you okay? Didn't he hurt you? No, not at all. He did everything he needed to do. In fact, I liked it more than I expected. This might be worth exploring in the future. This morning he is much calmer and constantly apologizes for being rude. Enough about me, how was your night? Janice giggled. You're right, he's really damn good. He's a wonderful lover. Don't worry, he learns quickly. What are your plans for the rest of the weekend? He has children this weekend. Today I'm going to meet them and his parents. There was a pause, and Jackie answered a little more quietly than usual. She was barely audible. Perhaps I should have done this. Janice's voice became stern. No, you shouldn't have. Don't be stupid. I don't agree with what you did. But you played it off in the best possible way. At least the children didn't have time to get to know you and become attached to you. It would hurt them. Her tone softened. I will never let this man go, so I need to become friends with Gary and Beth, and that's the first step. Meeting his parents is a bonus. Listen, I need to run. We have some more shopping to do before we pick up the kids. I'll call you tonight to see how you and Pete are doing. While I was listening to their conversation, I had already decided what I was going to do. No secrets. I came down the last step. Janice was holding the phone, and I heard Jackie say, Damn, he's behind you. Janice turned around, saw me, and went, Oh, shit. Her face turned red. Did you hear all this? Almost everything. Sorry. She realized the line was still open when Jackie's voice came from the phone. Did Jeff hear all this? I think so, Janice replied. I nodded. Yes, he heard everything. Damn, I better leave you alone. Jackie passed out. You have nothing to apologize for. Complete honesty. Remember, I smiled, although I would be interested to know about that very adjustment. Janice's face began to return to normal color. I learned how loving you can be last night, and now I wonder how brave and adventurous you can be. As I headed back upstairs to get dressed and make my call, I said over my shoulder, I'm sure you'll figure it out in the next couple of weeks. I forgot to ask her about the toothbrush again. We went to the local supermarket. Janice bought herself a nice skirt and blouse. Her shoes would be perfect for hiking. She pointed to a pair of leggings she had designed herself. Then she asked me to choose a bouquet of flowers that my mother would like, and more importantly, not those that she did not like. I chose pink carnations. All moms love carnations, right? While I was doing this, Janice ran off and came back with a toothbrush, toothpaste, shampoo, and soap in a shopping cart. She pointed to them and asked, Isn't it too early? I smiled. Not at all. She reached out to me and kissed me. We arrived at Mom and Dad's about 11:30. Even though I had the keys, I rang the doorbell. The door opened instantly. I think Mom was waiting for us. Mom, this is Janice, I said and handed her the flowers. Janice extended her hand. Mom took her and then pulled her into her arms. Nice to finally meet you. It is difficult to hide something from parents and children. These flowers are beautiful, thank you, said Mom, looking at the bouquet. He's been a little unstable for the last 9 months. Sounds like you've been having a hard time. But if you come to us, we assume that you have everything sorted out. Mom assumed too much and was wrong. You'll have to talk to her and Dad separately, away from children's ears. Mom invited us to come in. I introduced Janice. I thought Gary and Beth would understand. I'm sure Beth will definitely understand. Mom prepared the children's favorite sandwiches and brewed tea. Everything was going smoothly until I mentioned that Janice might be staying at our house sometimes. Beth looked at me and said, Dad, does this mean that you will have the same sounds in your bedroom as when Mom was with us? She couldn't have chosen a better moment to make this statement. Mom spat out a piece of sandwich with egg mayonnaise, and everything flew in different directions. She began to choke. Dad choked on his tea, which spilled everywhere. My face turned red as a fire engine. Janice was the only one who maintained her composure. Oh, I hope so. But if we're too noisy, tell us in the morning, and we'll figure something out. No, I like it. I like it when people sound happy, Beth said. We had not yet recovered from the first wave of coughing when the second blow hit us. Gary simply watched the commotion of the adults in bewilderment. Dad and children were cleaning up the mess on the kitchen table. Mom asked Janice quietly, "Was the dress you wore yesterday really that revealing?" Mom looked at me. "Your phone, dear, has 2 microphones." "No," Janice answered. "It's just not something you should wear when you meet the children and parents of your future groom." Now it was my turn to choke on my tea. Future groom. How I wish that all people would choose better moments for such words. We're almost out of paper towels to clean up all this mess. Janice and I took the kids home through the park and let them ride the miniature train, which Gary loved. Janice and I sat drinking tea and watching the children run around, exhausting themselves. "Jeff," Janice said to me. "What now?" I simply nodded. "Can I stay the night?" "Wow. In the same bed?" "I think Beth is older than you think." "I'll try to be quiet." I smiled. "And I'll try to make you loud." I treated the kids to pizza for dinner, a rarity in our house. Beth was eating her second bite when she looked at Janice and asked, "Are you going home today?" "No, if you don't mind." "I don't care," she said and looked at me. "You better tell Mom." "Children, I already told you, honey." I called Sandra quickly this morning after Janice said she wanted to meet Gary and Beth. I told her that the children would meet a female friend of mine. The only thing she asked was whether I was in a serious relationship with this friend. I answered yes. She was pleased. I understood her question. She wouldn't want the kids to date so many different women who might pass through my life. As if this could happen. I put the children to bed. We had our own established ritual. Janice didn't try to help. I think I understood her intention just to be there, to help if I asked, but not to interfere. We sat down and discussed our day. It was a new experience for all of us. Janice said she liked my mom, but she found my dad a little standoffish. She was right. He usually shares his thoughts later. I had no doubt about it. She took my hand and said, "I think Beth has already fallen asleep, and I'm a little tired. Can we go to bed?" I don't think the dream was on her mind. She proved this as soon as we entered my room. We made love. And then she surprised me. "Shall we play I See in the dark? It'll be fun." How much did Jackie manage to tell her? We really played. What did Jackie tell her sister? We played. I wonder if Jackie told her our last question. I felt Janice starting to fall asleep. "I see something starting with the letter L," I said. She answered in a drowsy voice. "A lamp." "No." "Light switch." "It's VS, silly, so no." I felt like she was trying her best to stay awake. "Are you giving up?" I asked. "Yes, sorry, I'm completely exhausted. You've exhausted me." "Lovers," I whispered. I felt her smile. "This has become our tradition. Whoever wanted to sleep said, 'I see something starting with the letter L,' even if it was not his turn." She fell asleep again in my arms. The children played outside and Janice helped me in the kitchen. I looked at her and said, "You look a lot like your sister." After I said that, I probably had a worried expression on my face. Janice reached out and took my hand. "Yes, we are really very similar. I understand why she fell in love with you. But there is one big difference. I know the pain that betrayal causes. I saw what it did to Pete and to you, and I lived through it myself. I like you, and I would never do this to a person I care about. Being honest with someone you're having problems with may be cruel, but it's much less painful than being hurt by cheating." There were tears in her eyes. "I will never do this to you or anyone else." I believed her 99%, but she was still her sister's sister. And then she said something even stranger. "Please take a risk. You won't regret it." She left in the late morning in an Uber, saying goodbye to her children. Gary asked her when she would come visit again. She looked at me and said, "Soon, honey, I hope soon." I smiled and nodded back at her. A happy smile lit up her face. I quickly called and was able to make a reservation at a family restaurant. I invited Mom and Dad. While Gary and Beth were playing on the playground, I told Mom and Dad the whole story: Jackie, Portsmouth, Pete and his baseball bat, Pete and golf, and finally Janice, the whole story. Mom sat with her mouth open, like a goldfish. When she was finally able to speak, she asked, "What are you going to do with Janice?" "I don't know, Mom. For now, I'll just go with the flow. But I like her. I'm just afraid of being hurt again and worry about the children." Dad said almost nothing. That was his style. Mom did most of the talking for him. He was an observer, studying people. "I think you'll be fine," he said finally. "She looks at you, touches you and the children in a way that says a lot. It's a risk, but it's worth taking, son." That's how my dad was, a man of few words, but usually his words turned out to be true. The children were exhausted from all this meeting Janice, playing in the park and dinner at the restaurant. Gary was like a grandfather. When I put them to bed, he said to me, "We like her." I kissed his forehead and left. Interesting. He said us, not me. 3 weeks later, while Sandra was picking up the children, she met Janice. It was a chilly meeting. I think Janice came early that Friday specifically to meet Sandra. She was a cunning woman, but it helped diffuse the situation. Later that evening, I received a text from Sandra. "She seems nice and the kids like her, just be careful." When she brought the children back that weekend, she asked to talk privately. I opened a bottle of red wine while she put the kids to bed and waited for her in the kitchen. I poured her a glass. It was obvious that something was bothering her. "We've been married too long not to notice it." "Thank you," she said, taking a sip. "Can I ask for your advice?" "Always, but you may not like my answer." "Richard, my boss, asked me on a date. I don't know what to do." I knew that Sandra had gotten a job at a local real estate agency. Her reputation increased the flow of clients into their office, which helped sales. She even liked it. "Is he not married?" "No, he's divorced," she answered and lowered her eyes. "He was caught cheating." Crap. How I wanted to say something. "Pot, don't call the kettle black." But I restrained myself and took a large sip of wine. Sandra looked at me. "Thank you for not saying anything." She sipped a little more wine. "It was with her friend, not with the client." "He was completely honest with you, don't you think?" "I think yes. It's been quite a while, but his ex-wife still shows up at the office. She owns part of the business and once told me to look after my friends." She was a little sarcastic. I asked her what happened. She told almost the same story. She just couldn't forgive him. I tried, but it didn't work. "Were you honest with him?" "Not really. He knows most things, but I didn't put everything in order. I suggest telling him the whole story honestly and completely, from beginning to end, and see if he still wants to go on a date with you. He can even come and talk to me if he wants. Would you do this for me? I loved you, and some part of me still does. You are the mother of my children. You have been punished for your actions. Now I just want you to feel good. And if it's good for you, then it's good for the children, and accordingly for me." These words clearly made her think. We discussed our plans for the coming months to agree on a schedule. We even finished a bottle of wine. I walked her to the door and opened it for her. In parting, she reached out and kissed me on the cheek. "I'm so sorry I ruined everything. I still love you, but I understand that we cannot be together again. Janice is good. The kids like it, I like it too, but I don't think she likes me very much." She came out, walked to the gate, waved to me, and walked towards her house. Sandra later told me that she told Richard everything. He still asked her out, and they promised to be completely honest with each other. She asked me if I minded him meeting the children. I knew about him. I saw him around town and at the golf club. He didn't seem like a bad person, so I didn't mind. Janice visited us the following weekend. Beth and Gary were with Sandra. Janice showed me that her underwear was not boring. Now I love corsets, especially if she designed it for herself and made it. When she went home, she left most of her underwear behind. taking the clothes that needed to be washed. The following Friday night was great. We played a board game with the kids, which Gary won. Entertaining them was a good way to tire them out. In the morning, I woke up and found the bed next to me empty. When I fully came to my senses, I heard the noise of small people chatting in the kitchen. I assumed Janice was sorting out breakfast or the kids. I pulled on trousers and an old t-shirt and went downstairs. I stood at the kitchen door. Beth and Gary were sitting at the kitchen table. Janice was standing in front of the stove, frying eggs, and 4 slices of bread lay next to her. Egg banjos for breakfast became a treat when Janice arrived. I studied her long, flowing blonde hair, her figure, and the concentration on her beautiful face, so she wouldn't burn her balls and keep the rocker soft. She really looked a lot like her sister. Even in her concentration, she must have sensed my presence. She looked at me and smiled as she put the eggs in the bread. She cut their banjos in half and opened them slightly to let the egg yolk flow out. She placed them in front of the children and gave them both napkins. They were going to spill egg yolk everywhere. Okay, this week it's Gary's turn to decide where we go, so think about it while you eat breakfast. Zoo, came an instant response from Beth through the slapping of bread and eggs. It's better not to talk with your mouth full, dear. Food is everywhere. I think 2 weeks ago we went to the zoo. Let's go somewhere else. And now it's Gary's turn to propose something. I just stood there leaning against the door frame and smiled at the scene at home. A warm feeling filled my body as I looked at Janice. She looked at me. Banjo or toast? Toast, please. She grabbed 2 pieces of brown bread, put them in the toaster, and took them out. She poured me a cup of tea and brought it to me at the door. As soon as she handed it to me, she didn't let go. She looked into my face, said and whispered, "I love you too." She did a good job holding the cup. You didn't say it, but it's written all over your face. I thought I'd be the first to say it, she said. She gave me a cup and I went and sat next to the children. A couple of minutes later, she returned with toast for both of us and sat down. With a cheeky grin on her face, she leaned over and whispered in my ear, "Let's hope it's not just lust." A quiet voice was heard from the other end of the table. "What is lust, Mommy? Damn, my daughter has big ears. This is what people have when they love each other." Janice answered, "I guess it's pretty close." She continued, "I think it was a distraction method. How about we go to Canterbury Cathedral, have an ice cream, and then stop by the seaside and buy fish and chips for tea on the way back?" It went well. I looked at Beth. "You just called Janice Mom. Where did that come from?" "Mom said that we should treat Janice like a mother too. But we can't have 2 moms, so Mom is number 1, and Janice is Mommy number 2. Just like Mom. So it's like a mom with an aunt at the end." The children's minds. I think Janice had tears in her eyes. Everything was settled. Janice would come over most weekends and watch the kids while I played golf with Pete or my friends. And it was one such occasion that Sandra found out that Janice liked her when she called her for help. Janice later told me how she might not like someone who left me so I could be hers. She wasn't going to tell her anything about this. That would be cruel and rude. The following year, Pete, Jackie, Janice, and I were at a dance at the golf club. Sandra was there with Richard. She had previously asked for my advice. It seemed like sound advice. I saw him at the club. We never spoke, but we knew each other and sometimes nodded to each other in recognition. She introduced him, and then all of us and me, as her ex-husband. He seemed okay. Then Sandra surprised me. She put her hand on Richard's arm and said, "Do you mind if I ask my ex-husband to dance?" He shook his head. She looked at Janice and said, "Janice, do you mind if I ask my ex-husband to dance?" "Please continue and thank you for asking." I was stuck. It was rude not to, so I took her to the dance floor. It was slow. We stayed an inch or so apart. When the song was almost finished, she leaned over and said, "I told Richard everything about our divorce, no secrets. I think he's going to ask me to marry him. What should I do?" Damn, what a question out of the blue. Follow your heart. Be honest with him, and especially with yourself. That's the only advice I can give. I wanted to say, don't cheat on him, but I felt that would be disgusting. The music stopped, she kissed me on the cheek, and we left the dance floor. We said goodbye to Sandra and Richard, and they returned to their table holding hands. The next morning, I received a message from Sandra. He asked, I said yes. Thanks for the good advice. We received an invitation to a wedding. It was a small event. It was Sandra's weekend with the kids. We all went to the ceremony and reception. Afterwards, we took the children home with us. It wasn't our turn, but the kids stayed with us for the next 2 weeks while Sandra and Richard were on their honeymoon. Richard later thanked me and said, "We'll do the same for you when you decide to tie the knot. By the way, what are you waiting for?" My dad said something similar. "Stop stalling, kid. What are you waiting for? What would you do if she asked you to marry?" He was right. I knew the answer to this question. We got married 6 months later. Pete walked Janice down the aisle, Jackie was the chief bridesmaid, Beth was the flower girl, and Gary was the ring bearer. He wanted to be a swordsman, but he had to settle for rings. Janice and I talked a lot, but rarely argued. We learned from Jackie and Sandra's mistakes. It is better to learn from the mistakes of others than from your own. Jackie, Pete, Sandra, and Richard also learned from their mistakes and did not repeat them. Richard died a couple of years ago, and Sandra moved back to her old house on Thames Avenue. I know that keeping this house was a source of disagreement between her and Richard, but she explained to him that the house in which they now lived was too big for one person, and whoever remained would move to Thames Avenue, where friends were nearby. We all became friends and put the past behind us. Well, almost. When we said goodbye to Sandra, she would sometimes look at me and say, "I still love you," or look at Janice and say, "I still love him." But she never said it when we were alone. This hurt Richard at first, but she turned to him and said, "I love you." Then she kissed him, and he forgave her because he loved her, and she really loved him. He was better than me in this regard. I'm not sure I could have done the same. I sat by the bed, holding her hand. Her hair hasn't been blonde for a long time. They turned platinum gray, but were still shiny and springy when she could walk. Gary and Beth were there too, sitting on the other side of the bed. Gary received family leave from the Navy. Beth left her husband to run their veterinary practice near Bristol. There were tears in their eyes, but Janice smiled as she looked at them and whispered, "Take care of him until he joins me." "We will, Mommy," Beth answered. She and her husband had a flat for me in Bristol if I wanted to move there, but I didn't want to leave Thames Avenue. Gary's wife moved in with me when Janice got sick and he was away. He was several years away from leaving the Navy, and the house was supposed to go to him. We have already decided everything among ourselves. She looked at me and said, "Thank you, we had a good life. I enjoyed every moment of it. But for the last time, let's play. I see something starting with the letter L." She closed her eyes. "A lamp." "No." "A lampshade." "No, it's a." "I'm tired, dear, I give up." She gently squeezed my hand and said, "Lovers." She didn't breathe again after those words, and the machine she was connected to sounded an alarm. I held her hand until the doctor came. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.